Hey guys, this is Manga here with a video on how to draw fight scenes. I think I've done something similar to this, but here we'll be going in with more detail. And for a model for this video, I will be using a panel from my comic that I'm working on. It's called Apple Black, and you'll be able to get the first 4 chapters free online. I'll leave a link to that below. You can also get the first 9 chapters and some extra things in Volume 1, and I'll leave a link for you guys to check out Volume 1 where you can get Volume 1. A fight sequence usually is basically a whole battle, between whoever and whoever, basically people fighting. But for this video, we'll focus on just, one panel, and the techniques that I use here will cater to more of a Japanese style of making comics. But the basic essence can be, used to make thumbnails, storyboards, or anything really, even if they're just storyboards for movie or music video, whatever. But just fight scenes and just capturing one panel and capturing the essence of the action that's actually taking place in one panel, because usually a panel only shows one action, and the whole fight scene is a sequence of panels with a sequence of actions in these panels. And if the fight scene is more of like an animated thing, then it's a whole scene from shot to shot. But here we're just focusing on one panel, on one action, and there will be certain things and certain techniques that I use, and this will be more Japanese style, but you can spread it out and use these techniques and execute elsewhere. For me, I usually have a storyboarding process for each of my pages, as most comic creators do, and during that process, that's where I try to find the right angle, the right dynamic angle, poses for the characters that are in the shot, whether it's their full body or just part of their body, and how the camera is tilting and everything. I just try to find the perfect panel that will truly capture the essence of the action that's taking place. And that's already previously been done in a thumbnail. And those are things that you think about. Just think about things that will truly bring the shot to life. What's going on in this panel is going to be a character. My character, Osamu, is going to be shooting like some ice sorcery stuff. I don't want to go too much in detail, but like an ice sorcery stuff at it's basically ice sorcery, because in the comic they're all sorcerers and stuff like that. So it's like ice at another character, and it's going to be shooting from his palm. And the way the scene is, it's kind of like one of those scenes that's supposed to kind of catch the other character off guard, because they were like previously just talking, and the next panel is just like a boom, straight up he's like shooting ice from his arm, and that's why it's actually the first panel on the page, because that's another thing you think about when someone flips the page or looks at the next page. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And with the previous page being a little more verbal, and maybe one character said something the other character didn't want to hear, and boom, you have this big panel on the next page that's gets straight down to business.
It's almost like each page builds some tension and some suspense, so that the reader wants to flip to the next page. And that usually happens with the last panel, maybe showing a reaction to something without showing that something, and showing the something on the next page. So you see the reaction of the character, and you want to flip to see what the character is reacting to, or why they're reacting to a certain thing or a certain action. It's just basically having a page have a build to the next page, and that's how it keeps readers flipping pages. Not all the time, but most times that's the technique being used. But again, those are things you think of when you're actually making a comic and you're going from panel to panel, or you're making a series of things. You can still you can have just one illustration of an illustration capturing a certain action in a fight scene, and that could be that. But here, since I'm using it it's part of a story, so I'm just giving you those extra tidbits just to make everything a little fun if anybody's interested. But the main focus is, again, just one panel, one action. Here I have the ground kind of tilted. So even though the panel has this very horizontal line, the panel's pretty squarish, but the ground in the panel, since I'm showing that, but it's not parallel to any line from the panels. It also, that tends to sometimes give a dynamic sense to the essence of the shot.
When I'm coming up with the actual pose of the character, I tend to go pretty simple, and sometimes I just use like straight lines just to try and get the anatomy right first, because this is the part where you're thinking. This is the hard part when you're trying to come up with the pose, which I've already come up with in the panel, but actually putting it together for like the final piece is, you know, trying to get the anatomy right, so you're not focusing on the details of what the character is wearing too much. You know, some people wouldn't draw the, like, say what the character is wearing at all, and from the angle we're coming at, we're not going to see at least the character shooting the ice ball, if you will. We're not going to see his face. We're going to see like a side of it, but not too much. Basically, all we're going to see is like the back of the ear, and then we're going to see some hair. We're going to see some foreshortening, a little perspective with the anatomy, right? With the one foot being way bigger than the other foot, adding depth. And another thing adding depth would be, you know, showing the other character that it's, you know, that's being fired at. So this is the hard part, is actually putting everything together. You can see with the hand, and trying to get the anatomy of the fingers right and everything like that. Those are things where this is just part of the, you know, this is the hard part, where you're just putting everything together and getting the anatomy right. You know, showing from the angle we're drawing, everything kind of gets smaller as it gets, you know, as you look up. So the foot being closest to the camera, that's his right foot being closer to the camera. That's why it's the biggest, and it's all part of foreshortening. So it gets smaller as it goes up. The hand, and, you know, it's kind of like in that open palm position where, you know, where that's where all the fireball. Well, in this case, it's not fireball. It's like an ice ball kind of thing. That's where it's going to be coming out of. And after I'm done drawing the pose, then I go in with the detail in, you know, in what he's wearing. And luckily for the character we're drawing over here, his clothes and his clothing is actually not too detailed, and it's all part of, you know, it's part of the things you have to think about in character design, especially for characters that you know you're going to draw like a million times. Or say it's also thought about in animation. If the character is going to be animated and drawn so many times, you know, usually the designs are not too detailed. Most of the time, detailed stuff like that in like video games, because video games, they're basically making one model of a character. You see all these games like you know, Warcraft and stuff like that, where it's like the armor is so detailed. Those are video games. They're just making like one 3D model, and it kind of, the animation is kind of like reusing that model to do other actions and stuff like that. You know, some animations have detailed characters, but there's rare cases maybe where they have like a lot of you know, a lot of artists or a huge budget and stuff like that. But here we have a basic character. You see his foot like kind of screeching, because it's kind of like jumping back, and as he's landing, that's where he's, you know, letting the other character have it. So you can see some like dust coming out of the ground, flying up. You can see the ground having kind of its own speed line, and for the, you know, for his head, it's kind of like giving an example there, where you're just going to see the ear, and mostly you're going to see the back of his head. So you're not going to see any of the other facial features with like the eyes, nose, and mouth. And even then, the jaw and stuff like that is being covered by his right arm. So here, going into more detail again with the clothing. Yeah, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is like the dust coming from the ground, because where they're, you know, you really have to, when you're doing things like this, you also have to think about the environment and how it adds to the scene. So him jumping back, his feet screeching on the ground, so dust to be flying up. The ground has its own speed line, which is like, you know, him coming back, and, you know, and also has like dust in the background that he's not interacting with, and that's just going to be a little smooth. You'll see it in more detail once I ink this drawing, because this is, you know, this is part of a page for a comic that I'm doing. So this drawing is going to be inked. And for the hand, just so people see it more, have a better shot of the hand, a closer shot. You can see it's almost the same thing, where you start off easy and you go into the details later, like with adding fingernails and stuff like that. But that's basically what's there, and I'm just gonna erase that. So you have the ground's a little tilted, you know, add some like, it makes the scene a little more dynamic. And you have the screeching off the ground. The place is already smoky, so the smoke you see behind him is just from the place already. Then now where you drawing the other character far away is going to be much smaller, adding depth to the shot. And the character is right above the vanishing point that I used for the ground to do the speed lines on the ground. Because usually when I'm doing those speed lines, the lines are pointing to one spot, usually where the character's, the angle where the character's jumping from, and all adds detail and adds depth and stuff like that. The sound effects, for those of you who know me, sound effects can be whatever you like. In my style, I usually just use exclamation points and allow the readers to, interpret, however they think the sound is going to be. I leave it up to them, and use the exclamation point to just emphasize on how loud it should be. Here I just use exclamation marks. Once in a while I'll use actual words, but for the most part I use exclamation marks, and allow readers decide how things would sound, because sometimes you can come up with a sound that's just flat out ridiculous. So here, now I'm coming up with speed lines. Speed lines to emphasize he's jumping back, speed lines to also kind of give an idea of what he's aiming at, the person he's aiming at. And I like to give the lines in the beginning. I like to give all of them their space. Then I go to each line and add more lines, and I always stroke towards the vanishing point. So as the line gets closer to the vanishing point, that's where the line kind of becomes, I guess, less visible, because it's like a stroke to the vanishing point. Sometimes people draw speed lines and it's like a straight line, but it's a line, right? First off, sometimes it doesn't have a vanishing point; it's just a bunch of lines, and in my opinion, doesn't really look good. But for the most part, I like to draw to a vanishing point, and I like to make it feel like a stroke. Some people draw like a line, like it's finished, almost like they're drawing a background, and I think it loses a sense of movement when you do that. So I like to make the lines feel like a stroke, and they're all pointing to, like, they all have a vanishing point, stuff like that. You can see that the ice has its own, in this case it has its own sound effect, and then the sounds that his feet make when they're screeching on the ground also has its own sound effect. The word bubble there has, some, word bubbles, that's another style. People do have certain ways that they do theirs, but have the kind of, wild bubble, text bubble, and it's usually what it is him, kind of saying a spell, sorcerers, spells. That's kind of the theme that's going on. Some text bubbles usually just round if maybe the character's talking in a very calm state. But usually for me, in my style, when they're shouting, I like to have the text bubble be a little wild and have like some spikes, and then the text is usually really huge. And in this case, when I write text for like spells, I like to write them in like some kind of fancy font, or even me creating my own font or something like that. And that's what's going to happen, and you'll see some of that in the final piece, and also when I'm inking. One of the main things is just to capture a shot that have a shot that captures the essence of the action. So in this case, we have this character firing this ice ball or ice beam at the other character. That character is actually Sophia, and if you guys know Sophia, I probably have an image on the screen. But anyways, we have the camera closer to Osamu. It's kind of like allowing the reader kind of be in his shoes, firing at the other character. So we're with the angles kind of not focusing on him, focusing on her, because you can see all the panel shots and not the panel shots, the screen, can't talk, the speed lines, all pointing towards her, and the camera's closer to him. And it's almost like we're shooting her, so we're seeing her from a distance, and the shot also captures the whole beam and how it's moving towards her, and it has all the all the necessary drawings within the panel to tell the story of what's going on within the panel. Hopefully that makes sense. So, also remember to keep the environment alive, and you have all these things like dust and smoke and speed lines and the bubbles and sound effects and cool dynamic angles and cool camera angles, whether they're tilted or whether they have depth or no depth. But you also have to remember where you will have some action scenes and action panels that may not need a speed line, because usually speed lines are there to emphasize on movement. So if there's a shot where maybe the characters are in one place and they're not moving at all, and the panel captures both characters clearly, and it's just one punch, and it's from maybe an angle far away from the angle where the camera is capturing both characters. It's not even a close-up at all. You might want to stay away from a speed line or a focus line. Here is actually a focus lines, because it's actually focusing on one character. Speed lines are when you actually don't see the vanishing point in the panel. So all the times I've been saying speed lines actually meant focus lines, but there will be sometimes some panels that you'll be using speed lines, like the one with her legs screeching on the ground. Those are speed lines. You don't see any vanishing point. They're all somewhat parallel to each, like each line is somewhat parallel to each other. So these are things to keep in mind, but you also have to make sure you don't always use all of them, because there will be some panels that may not need, say, a sound effect, or say focus lines or speed lines. Or maybe you have all these dust and screeching from the ground. Maybe the place where they're fighting is not dusty at all, so even if his feet screeches off the ground, or a character hits a wall, there will be no dust. The other things to keep in mind, maybe if a character hit a wall and you have cracks in the wall, and you also have like sense of like tiny rubbles flying off the wall as well. So you just remember to like keep the environment alive and have elements that bring maybe sense of movement or other senses, just to keep the action alive and the panel alive. Also remember to focus and take your time when coming up with the panel during the thumbnail or storyboarding phase. That's the easiest one. It's kind of like setting up the blueprints for the actual page or panel. Most of your thought goes into that. So when you're creating the actual panel, it's kind of like smooth sailing, and you don't have to think too much. It's kind of like similar to when I sketch and now I have to ink. Even though I have to focus while I'm inking, because you don't want to mess up, you're basically tracing on what you already sketched. So there's a sense of fun to it, because you're not thinking at all. Or similar to when you're coming up with the pose of the character, where everything's kind of simplified in the beginning, and then you go in with the details later. That's kind of going in with the details. It's kind of like the easy part, where you're just adding certain elements just to bring the character to life or something like that. And going in with details doesn't only apply to character designs and stuff like that. It could be with buildings. Maybe you're drawing a building, drawing a city. You basically have, in the beginning, they'll all basically be boxes and shapes, simple shapes, and then you go in with the details later. Say it's a building, you go in with the windows and the just things that make a building a building. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave comments if you have any. I'd love to answer any questions for those who wanting to make their own comic, or just wanting to learn certain things about drawing. Please, you can check out my other videos. I have more tutorials and things like that that may help you. On manga tools, manga tutorials, etc. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video.
Again, don't forget to like. It's one of the things that makes the video popular. And check the links below to my other social media that may be helpful to you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, Manga, we good? We good.